So remember, with unemployment, there are two kinds of unemployment. So in the short run, basically, like at any time during the economy, we could have frictional, structural, and cyclical. So that's your actual unemployment, right? So those are the three options. The other type of unemployment we have is going to be the long run, where you are at your natural rate of unemployment. And that's where you only have frictional and structural. So in the long run, where you're at your potential, you do not have a recession, right? You are at your potential, everything's good. So at this point, you have zero cyclical unemployment, and that's where you are. That's when you are at the long run, where everybody's willing to work and you're good to go. Now, the short run is where you have the three options. So you could have a recession where you have frictional, structural, and cyclical. So therefore, you would be in a recession or a recessionary gap because you are not at your potential. The agri-demand agri-supply curve diagram shows cyclical unemployment by how close the economy is to potential or the full GDP employment level. So basically, if you are not at your potential, this means you do have basically more people than frictional and structural that are not working because you are not at your potential. You're not having, just the frictional and structural. So you have a little bit extra amount of people that are not working because of a contraction or a recession. So therefore, when you are having that gap there between the full employment and the current, when there's this gap here, this is where you have cyclical unemployment. The low cyclical unemployment for an economy occurs when the level of output is close to potential. Close to, not at it, close. So therefore, you still have this gap. High cyclical unemployment arises when the output is substantially to the left of GDP. So basically what's happening here is that the farther away you are, more than likely, your unemployment is going to be higher. So what we're going to see here is that whenever we are in a business cycle, when we're in a expansion, remember expansion is where real GDP is increasing. So if real GDP is increasing, this means we're getting closer to potential. So then we would have cyclical unemployment decreasing. However, when we have a contraction, wherever real GDP is going down, we could have a cyclical unemployment increasing. Okay. So that's how we can look at unemployment in the agri-demand, agri-supply curve. So let's say that we are currently in equilibrium. So if we're drawing equilibrium, we need a agri-demand, we need a short-run agri-supply curve, and we need the long-run agri-supply curve. So remember, this is equilibrium because everything is right here together at the potential. But let's say there is a decrease in consumption. A decrease in consumption could happen because of expectations of inflation. It could happen because of a change in pessimism. So you could be more pessimistic about business opportunities. So if we are pessimistic about business opportunities, so like investments, will decrease. So if you're pessimistic, then investment goes down. If investment goes down, this does mean agri-demand goes down as well. So we're going to shift the agri-demand to the left. This means this is our new equilibrium. So this is our Y star, PL star. And as you can see here, because agri-demand decreases, this caused a recessionary gap, which meant that your output goes down. And since your output goes down less than your potential, this has to mean that your unemployment had to go up. Because your output goes down, you need less people to make things, so you fire some people, and this is going to create more unemployment. And so that's what this is right here, is high cyclical unemployment arises when the output is substantially to the left of the potential GDP. So whenever output goes down, we will have unemployment go up. So when we have, let's say, an increase in consumer confidence, when we have an increase in government spending. So if that happens, let's say government spending goes up, aggregate demand goes back up, so now we're going to go back up. So now we're here at Y2. When this happened, right, we went to here. So because output has increased, you need more people to make things. So unemployment will go down because you're hiring more people. So unemployment goes down. Okay. So that's how unemployment is going to happen with the aggregate supply and aggregate demand curve. We can also look at inflation as well. Inflation fluctuates in the short run and typically occurred either during or just after economic booms. So I'll show you why, what we mean by economic booms in a second here. But basically what's happening here is that we can also look at a change in price level. Rates of inflation generally decline during recessions. Okay, so I'll show you again. The aggregate demand and aggregate supply framework implies two ways that inflation pressures may arise. So number one, if the aggregate demand continues to shift to the right when the economy is already at or near GDP potential and full employment, this pushes the equilibrium into the aggregate supply curve's steep portion. So, aggregate supply is going to go here and then up. Okay, so when we're in the inflationary pressures to where aggregate demand is increasing in the vertical region, that's where we really have inflation. So the other thing we can have is a rise in input prices that affects many or most firms across the economy, such as oil, labor, resources, things like that. If those are more expensive, that changes the supply, which changes the price. So let's take a look at these. Boom, boom. So let's look at the first one here. Let's look at when aggregate demand is continuing to shift to the steep portion. So basically, this is what we call an economic boom, where people were like, I don't want to buy from the country because it's not looking good right now. I'm going to save up some money. And then when they have more money because they saved it, they just start buying a lot more stuff. And when they start buying a lot more stuff, output increases to where now you are having an economic boom. And so when you're having an economic boom like this, such as, let's say you were in a recessionary gap here, and then because you have more people consuming, so more consumption, then this will increase aggregate demand. So we're going to shift this to the right. So what's interesting here is that you were at this point, Y star PL star. And then because of the increase in consumer confidence, you are now here. Okay? You are now at this point, Y double star and PL double star. So looking at where you started and where you ended. You started here on prices, and then prices went up. You started here on output, and then it increased. So output increases now. So the main thing is right here. Price level goes up. When prices go up, this means inflation or the pi symbol, is increasing. Okay, PL double star is higher, so that means inflation is increasing. So therefore, inflation is increasing. So this is when we have an increase in aggregate demand. If aggregate demand just kept on increasing, so people were really consuming, let's say they jump up to here, they're now on that steeper portion. And so when they're on the steeper portion, you're going to have a big increase in the price level. So when we have an increase in the aggregate demand, we will have an increase in the price level, and this will cause inflation. When this happens, we do have a term for this. When you have inflation, and the reason you have inflation is because of demand. This is what we call demand pull inflation. If someone came up to you and said, hey, we have inflation, and you're like, well, why do we have that? And then they tell you, well, we had more businesses investing, we had more government spending, we had more consumption happening. Then you can say, oh, well, the reason you have inflation is because of demand pull inflation. So this gives you a reason as to why prices are increasing. The other method for getting us to have inflation is a rise in input costs. So how that's going to work is this. Let's say you are at equilibrium. Notice that the graphs all have aggregate demand and supply and a long run. Let's say, for instance, you are at equilibrium. And then, all of a sudden, the price of oil goes up and the price of labor goes up. As a firm who is producing things, if your input prices are higher, this means you are buying less of the inputs because they're more expensive, you buy less inputs. If you buy less inputs, you make less output. If you bought less steel, you cannot make the same amount of cars. So if the price of steel is higher, you supply less cars. So what happens here is the price of inputs or the price of wages, either way, things are more expensive, then this is going to change the aggregate supply curve, and that's going to go down. So the short run aggregate supply curve is going to go down to the left. So this means you're here at this price level. Let's call it PL2Y2, and you started here. So as you can see here, starting at PL1, now you're at PL2. So you go up. You're going from this equilibrium to this equilibrium. So prices go up and output goes down. So supply goes down, price level goes up, output goes down. And what are you noticing here? Price level goes up. That means inflation, or the pi symbol, is going up. We do have a name for this, where if your supply is going down and this is causing inflation to go up, this is what we call cost push inflation. When the input prices are higher and this is causing inflation, this is called cost push inflation. All right, so the prices are higher, so then because of that, this is pushing the inflation higher. So this is what a decrease in the supply curve is going to look like. We're going to go from PL1 to PL2. It's going to shift to the left, and that's going to increase prices. So that's how we can show inflation. Inflation is just an increase in the price level. If we had a decrease in the price level, then we would have deflation.